Welcome back to our Succession podcast. This week we're talking about the 5th episode of season 4. We're officially halfway through. This episode is called Kill List.
I knew you were going to remind me it's the halfway point.
Succession does Midsummer. Boar on the floor, more like troll in the fjord.
This episode did remind me a lot of Hunting, just seeing the Roys and co out of their element in such a huge way.
I must really like Matsson because I was really excited for this episode in a way that I wasn't totally expecting to. I think this character is the perfect guest star for where we're at right now, where we need this sort of unpredictable force in there. And yeah, he had really fun energy with all of the main cast.
Yeah, I think I don't like Matsson himself all that much, but what he brings out in the other characters is just really exciting.
And that's often what they do with their guest stars, is it's more about what they're bringing to the table with the other cast than the character himself, necessarily.
Yeah, people always asking, like, oh, where's Tabitha? Where's this other character who we really liked a couple seasons ago? Like, they don't matter. That's why. They were just there to
They
help.
don't exist. NRPI when they're not around.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that this episode was making me think about, with both what happened in this episode and what it portends for the rest of the season, is the main sort of thesis statement of Succession, which is basically when a family is this powerful, their personal dysfunction becomes the dysfunction of the world. And I thought you could really see that kind of playing out with the decisions that the brothers were making, but also Shiv and kind of even Matsson himself. We got a little insight into what a weird little freak he is. So it was like they're making these huge decisions that are going to impact like a bunch of people, but it all just comes down to these petty little personal power plays.
It's scary and also a little humanizing to think about that, these deals that you hear about in the news, so much of it probably is coming down to similar things like this, just very petty arguments and very personal reasons that people are doing things, because none of these people are that smart. That's something I think Succession is really good at showing, is these people are not any smarter than us. They just got very lucky in terms of the power that they had.
There is often for me kind of a disconnect between like the emotional stakes and the business stakes in the show, which I think is on purpose and I think it really works. But in this episode, for instance, I did not want Kendall and Roman to keep Waystar. Like I didn't want their plan to work. So it was this interesting thing where I am rooting for them in a sense, but I was not rooting for them to get what they wanted because I know that what they wanted would be bad for them. So it was just this interesting thing where I was kind of relieved at the end, like, oh good, they fucked it all up.
I was having a hard time here because I was just feeling for them so much that I kind of wanted them to have it. I was like, oh no, the evil tech company is going to ruin the alt-right dinosaur, gotta protect it. But also, like, I know they're not going to be happy if they get to keep it. They just think that. There's always something they think is going to make them happy, but it's not the case. Like, Kendall wants to be Logan in the 80s. That's really what he wants, but that's not a role that exists anymore, especially not within Waystar. Like, that era is done. He, at the beginning of this episode, really got to parallel his opening at the beginning of the series, which was very fun to see. He's finally gotten what he wanted, but he's never actually going to have what he wants. It's not going to be what he thinks. And I don't know what Roman actually wants. I don't think Roman knows what he wants except for his dad to come back.
Yeah, he was really lost in this episode, and it shows in the way that he's so easily convinced by Kendall.
Yep.
To do the opposite of what he was saying he wanted to do for so long. They kept referring to their dad's legacy and how Matsson's going to ruin this company. And that's another just point of disconnect for me, because I'm like, I don't care if they ruin this company. I mean, what is Waystar? This company kind of sucks. Like, they make news that makes the country worse. They run theme parks that look kind of depressing. They make shitty movies, and they have a cruise line that kills people. What are we saving here? What is this company that we're supposed to be like, yeah?
There's like, yes, it sucks, but we can make it good and wholesome. The company is now their dad. They're like, yeah, it sucks, we can make it better.
God, you're so right. It's like the dad that they want to have, the company that they think they have, but it's all just shitty.
Everything on the show is so, the business and the personal, there's no separation.
Well, the main event of the episode is this long drawn out like negotiation with Matsson that kind of takes place across 3 separate scenes. And the first one gets off to a real great start when Matsson kind of, it's just one power play after another. He like asked them to bring everyone and then he's like, why did you bring everyone? And then he's like trauma dumping about his dead dad while stripping off his shirt.
I loved the stripping off his shirt power move. Especially, they spent so much time showing us all the characters like layering up for Norway, and then him stripping into a very casual t-shirt and Roman and Kendall quickly falling and taking off their coats was great.
Oh, you're right. They did. They were like, oh, we're overdressed now. Yeah, that was nuts. He's like, oh, your dad died? Sorry, my dad killed himself and I found him. Anyway. Whoa!
The way he said it was so inhuman and just scary.
I know. Weird guy. Weird guy. And
weird guy. The weirder he gets, the more interesting he gets as a character, for sure.
I agree. I'm excited to see a little more of him. Yeah, the rest of this season. Wait, not like that. Well, maybe like that. He and Shiv, I don't know, man. We'll talk about it later, but
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so the negotiations really break down when Matsson reveals that he wants to keep ATN. And in this scene, I thought that it showed just the weak point of having two CEOs, because Kendall and Roman were definitely not on the same page, where Roman just was like, no, there's no way that we're gonna give you ATN, but Kendall was more willing to consider it, and then Matsson was just able to play them off each other and made them look like fools.
Yeah, Kendall like pretty immediately asked for a number, and you're right, it doesn't work, because like if a CEO is like, no, we don't want this, that's a powerful negotiation tactic to be like, okay, you have to offer something else. But if there's another person there who will be like, no, actually, I'm okay with this, so let's talk about it, that doesn't work.
Then the doors open and also you look weak.
You look really weak. I will say, based on this scene, I was worried that the episode was going to be very Kendall versus Roman over the ATN thing, so I'm glad it ended up going in a different direction and that they were more cohesive in the subsequent meetings with Matsson.
Even though they weren't completely in sync with what they wanted, there wasn't a lot of real conflict between them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is their first day, so let's not give them too much credit for not.
That's what I want everyone watching this episode to remember.
They're doing great for it being their first day.
And their dad just died. And they didn't sleep, and they're jet lagged.
They're doing okay, and they were pretty good with each other, I think, as far as like talking about what they wanted and not jumping down each other's throats right away.
Yeah, they're still being pretty open with each other, even if Shiv has been cut out. I thought you could really see in this episode how much Shiv and Kendall don't like each other. Like, when the three of them were a team, they were, kind of bonding, they wanted the same things for a while. But now, like, from the opening scene, every time, like, Shiv talked, Kendall looked so annoyed and didn't want her to be part of it. And likewise, Shiv was so annoyed at everything Kendall was doing.
When Roman and Shiv are fighting, they seem like they still like each other, but Kendall and Shiv might actually kill each other one day, I think. They
might. The big show out, on one of those mountains.
The sort of stage 2 of this negotiation, later on, there's this very tense, awkward conversation that kind of starts in front of everybody that's looking on when they're sitting around the table, and Matsson's like, oh, we're just waiting for you to make your counter. And Kendall's like, oh, we're going to do this here. Kendall, say what you will about it, but he could hang this episode. I thought he was doing pretty good as far as just, like, not taking Matsson's shit. Whereas Roman would, like, well, we'll get to it, but until a point, Roman just let him kind of walk all over them. Whereas Kendall was like, he got a few lines in that he was all right. He was doing all right.
Matsson kept trying to go for him, like, with the Walter comment, but Kendall fared very well and was, like, firing back, which is great.
Yeah, he played it well.
Yeah, I really liked the moment when, you just mentioned, when Matsson tries to interrupt, and Kendall's like, I'd rather you didn't, because you see Roman's face in that moment, he kind of smiles a bit, so that was some nice solidarity, even though they were very at odds in that scene.
Yeah, Matsson is just being a world-class dick, which was fun to watch.
It's very nice to see the culture clash, and his huge critique of ATN. What were your thoughts on that?
It's something that makes sense in a way. I mean, man, big news for Fox News today with Tucker Carlson being fired. So on one hand, like, our sort of real world counterpart seems like a model that's not sustainable, but at the same time, it is their most kind of successful and probably profitable are. Well, I'm not sure if that's actually true, but it's at least what maybe brings them closest to power. I mean, a movie studio is like whatever, but they can elect a president with ATN.
And I do think they're right that he doesn't get ATN. At least from the conversation, his whole thing about IKEAing it to fuck, it sounds like some of the bullshit Kendall says at times where you're like...
Yeah, that made no sense.
You don't know what you're talking about. You're talking about nothing. And there is an audience for, alt-right political news.
Oh, yeah. Roman did have a plan to kind of like zhuzh up ATN, so let him in there, make it worse.
It was an evil plan, but it didn't sound profitable.
It was an evil plan, but it would have really brought in the money. I mean, this was a very kind of harsh conversation where he said, you're a parts shop, good parts, bad brand, and then I don't care what you think, you're a tribute band. That one definitely hit all of them.
Matsson is style over substance, but he has great style. He says some really great lines in this episode. That was like a jaw-dropping moment for sure. Especially with the lead up with Greg. Like, I feel like the scene was a wake-up call for them because they were like, oh, it's a family company. Greg's, Logan's relative. Don't worry, we can trust him. And everyone else there is like, bro, that's a huge red flag that you're all related and
right.
Nepotism babies. You're not here on merit.
Yeah, that was so cringe, like Tom trying to kind of like edge into their conversation about European politics and he had no idea what he was talking about. He was just like, oh, Americans, we don't care. We don't want to know. We don't know and we don't want to know. Like, they just look like massive doofuses.
It looks so stupid. And it'll be a tribute band just, playing Logan's greatest hits.
Right. And that is kind of what Roman in particular wants to do. He keeps saying, we want to do Dad's deal. We want to do Dad's deal. So he's not wrong in a way, but Kendall really wants to prove that wrong and show that he's his own guy and he has his own great, terrible ideas.
Which of these things is worse? It's really hard to say. I do understand the idea of finishing his breakfast and, trying to make sure what would have happened if he hadn't died happens. It doesn't make any business sense. It happened. We have to move on.
So Kendall gets Roman on his side fairly easily. I think he kind of appeals to Roman's feelings here by saying that Matsson is going to destroy everything that Dad built, because Roman definitely is concerned with kind of preserving that legacy. But I also really liked what Kieran Culkin said in the after show, where he said that he just hates Matsson and was kind of looking for a reason to just tell him to go fuck himself. The emotional part of it was kind of there for Roman.
It was, but it was really hard to tell throughout the episode. As you mentioned, Roman kept changing sides, and even in this scene I was noticing on rewatch, Kendall keeps saying, you like it though, right? You want this? And Roman refuses to talk about himself. He answers, oh, this was Dad's plan, or the others might not like it, but he doesn't say anything about what he actually wants here. I do think in the final scene on the mountain, it does become clear, yes, this is what Roman has wanted all along.
He probably doesn't really know what he wants as far as a business plan. He doesn't have that same kind of level of ambition and vision that Kendall has.
He hates Matsson, and that's valid.
So they put together this plan to try to tank the deal, and the fact that part of their plan was making a bunch of hungover Swedish people watch the 3-hour-long Callispatron rough cut first thing in the morning was one of the funniest things anyone in Succession's ever done.
It's such a stupid plan.
3 hours, rough cut. Get him in a room. It's got the watermark over it.
Even if that had been a good movie, I would have hated that. That's
I know.
Awful. It's not a good plan. But again, this is their first day, and I think a lot of people may be looking to this episode to say, oh, can they do it? Can they do what Logan did? And I think you really cannot tell from this episode. I also do want to point out that Kendall and Shiv were right about the Gojo deal. There was more money to be squeezed out of it, and Matsson was not going to walk. He really wants this deal.
That is true. And it's kind of petty for him to do it, just to be well, fuck you back then.
Since you don't want me taking your company, I'm going to take it.
I'm going to take it extra hard. So he sees through their ploy of trying to tank the deal, says that Logan was a prick, but at least he knew what he wanted. And that definitely hits Roman. You can see it on his face, which is just so sad that he's like, our dad was not a prick.
When one of the last things he said to him was, "Are you a cunt?"
So yeah, this scene, loved it. Loved it. Obviously, Roman just flipping out, losing his mind, just being so honest. And also blaming Matsson for it is really interesting. Like, Shiv blamed herself, Roman's blaming Matsson, but he had called his dad a cunt in a voicemail. That was the last thing he kind of said to him before he died. And then he gets mad at Matsson for calling him a prick. So there is like maybe a level of
projection.
Yes, projection, exactly.
I was not expecting him to blame Matsson for his dad's death, especially after he blamed himself initially. It's interesting and very real, I think, to see that kind of evolving. Kieran was amazing here, especially at the beginning when you can hear his voice kind of breaking, but he's trying really hard not to when he brings up what Matsson said.
Well, and I'm really glad that did get brought up because I was just thinking about that line, you know, when is your dad gonna die, and how flippant he was about it, and it's kind of been cast in a new light now.
I love that Roman also sort of brought up when he goes up the mountain, he says sending out cool tweets, which is not a great insult for Roman, but I'd like to think Roman remembers that tweet Matsson made at the end of the last season that was really insulting to Roman and their dad and the deal they were making.
Yeah, and that kind of blew everything up in the first place in a way, and shifted the dynamic of what the deal was at that point.
So I had a question for you. How much of that do you think Kendall heard?
All of it.
Yeah.
He wasn't being quiet. I think he heard all of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that he just stood there quietly not saying anything and then didn't like get mad at Roman afterwards. He was like, well, maybe it played.
I know, I love that.
Oh, brothers.
And Roman's just kind of standing there like, no, I'm so embarrassed.
Roman's like, I fucked up so badly. But I probably felt good in the moment a little bit, I hope.
Yeah, that was a really nice shot of the two of them.
Also the fact that Matsson had his, like, chopper fly him off while they had to wait for their, like, cuck cable car to come up.
Okay, this reminded me a lot of Lion in the Meadow, actually. Just the way that he made it a physical test, you know? Yeah. Oh, you want to make a deal with me? Then meet me in my place. And, oh, is it okay if you just climb up this fucking mountain?
It's interesting that there's that, rumor, I mean, it's not necessarily a rumor, it's just like an actual thing, that Kieran Culkin is considering submitting as a lead actor for the Emmys. What do you think about that?
I wish all the awards that I want could go to all the people that I want.
Yeah.
And by that I mean Kieran. And like, category fraud is like, I don't like it, but I understand it. You know?
What do you mean category fraud? Who are you accusing of fraud?
It is very clear who I'm accusing of fraud.
You're accusing Kieran Culkin of category fraud on this podcast? Not our baby girl.
Our baby girl.
Not my baby girl.
I can accuse your baby girl of category fraud.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's crazy to me. That's crazy. We're gonna have to talk about this off the air.
Again, I want him to win ultimately, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably should submit as supporting, just so he's not competing against Jeremy.
Well, but who is he competing against in supporting this season? Because I feel like Matthew is not going to get as much.
Right, I mean, we'll see. So, yeah, like, it might be best for him to stay in supporting, but also, like, this season, like, unless they're gonna cut his hours big time for the last half of it, he's been getting just a lot of screen time, and I would say he is kind of a lead actor in the show this season. Don't roll your eyes at me.
No, I see it. I guess I'm more traditional and stuck on there's one main and the rest are supporting.
But Brian and Jeremy were always both supporting as lead anyway.
That's different.
What? How is that different?
Like, they made more sense as co-leads because their relationship was the main thing of the show.
Was.
Well, he's dead.
Yeah, exactly, was. What's the main thing of the show now?
Kieran is the new Brian.
Yeah, okay. We got it. Thank you.
I'm not agreeing with you, I'm just gonna...
You're just gonna let it go. I think that Sarah Snook should 100% submit as lead, in my opinion. I just think that's like a better category. Like, who's she going up against? unless Ray Seahorn also goes to lead.
Well, she should go to lead.
Ray Seahorn, she should, but I hope that whatever one of them does, the other does the opposite.
Ray is not going to win anyway.
I know Ray's not going to win, but then at least my certain friends who hate Succession won't get mad at me when she beats her.
Yeah, I don't want to read those tweets.
I know, I don't want to read about how Ray Seahorn got robbed at the expense of Sarah Snook. Like, no. No, thank you. Like, Sarah Snook's also never won an Emmy. Get real.
Yeah, and Better Call Saul would not be winning Emmys even without Succession.
Exactly, thank you. Sorry. Like, it's a good show. It's just not winning any Emmys. It's never happened.
It happens to a lot of shows. Succession actually has a chance, so I really hope that whatever category they're in, Sarah and Kieran win next year.
Also, stop nominating Nick Braun. Literally, if they nominate Nick Braun, I'm gonna lose my mind.
The Emmys are a joke.
The Emmys are a fucking sham. But yet I care so much.
That's how they get you.
So at the end, Matsson goes around them and takes his offer to Frank, which now ensures that the board knows, everyone knows. I don't know if this is exactly a bear hug exactly, but it definitely has that vibe of like, this is an offer too good that you can't turn it down. And now everyone knows what the offer is. So an interesting move, see if they can wriggle their way out of it somehow. But I loved the vibe of this last scene, how everyone was congratulating them and Kendall and Roman were just visibly miserable.
They weren't even trying to fake it. I love too that Shiv doesn't know exactly what happened, but she knows her brothers and knew what they actually wanted here.
So Shiv has a pretty interesting through line in this episode, even though it's not a lot of screen time for her necessarily. She definitely had a big impact on this episode. So she has an interesting scene with Matsson where he's into her, right? That's
very clear.
Obviously the vibe. And he asks her about Tom and then weirdly confesses to sending liters of his frozen blood to Ebba, his employee and communications director.
How much blood? I need to know how much blood.
Enough that it at first was a joke, then not a joke, then a joke again, and now not a joke. So however many that is, which is, I think, a lot to go through all of those ups and downs.
It was clearly never a joke. This is such a guy way to describe the entire situation.
Typical men.
Typical men sending you half liters of their blood as a joke.
What a fucking freak.
What girl hasn't dated that guy?
Shiv's reaction to this whole thing was really, like...
She's a trooper.
You know, she can hang too, you know? She was kind of playing it perfectly the right way, like not giving him too much, but kind of doing the cool girl thing or wow, okay. And also sort of slyly like sneaking in some good words for Jerry and Carolina.
Yeah.
She did a gender solidarity for the first time in her life. Queen.
That's such a good point.
Like for the first time in her life, Shiv did not knife another woman in the back.
And actually went out of her way to support them and make sure they got to keep their jobs.
Girl boss shit, for real.
Yeah, it was very subtle and great of her. And I think hopefully protect her future too, if there are other women in this company.
So what do you think about Matsson telling her that she's a lot like Logan?
First off, ouch. Just, you can tell that has a huge impact on her at this time. Though he says it like it's nothing. He says she's like Logan because she can take a joke, and I think that's absolutely correct. I think both she and Roman have this trait that Logan had, which is they can generally take a joke and pal around with, you know, people are trying to get something out of. Kendall is not as good at it, and Roman in this episode is just right out of it. Normally he can take a joke.
We've talked a little bit about this whole, like, which one of the siblings is the most like Logan. And actually my favorite moment from the official podcast this week was that Kara Swisher, bless her heart, my beef aside, she asked the question that I would have loved to ask of Kieran, which is, so Sarah Snook says that Shiv is the most like Logan. What do you think about that? And he was just like, I wholeheartedly disagree. Which, so cute. I would love to get them in a room together to argue about this. But I kind of find it to be a sort of useless argument, but also kind of like a litmus test about what you think the most Logan-y traits are. It kind of reveals what you think Logan's most...
defining trait?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. I found it interesting how he focused on, well, Shiv's politics are very different from Logan's. Because that's not something I would personally think of when I think about, well, who's the most like Logan.
For Roman, that's almost kind of a point against him for me, because I think his like desire to do what his dad wanted him to do makes him not like Logan. Kendall constantly trying to kill his dad is his most Logan-y trait ever.
Yeah. Roman wanting to do right by another human being, it makes him not like Logan.
No, Logan.
And I think also the fact that Logan, doesn't care about politics, which of course isn't, it's not a totally thing. When someone's like, oh, I don't care about politics, they still have their own political beliefs. Of course, like, he just happens to be, on the right side and Shiv happens to be on the left. There's a version of Logan that exists on a liberal side, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, his name's Ewan.
Yes. I think it's the kind of thing that it makes the kids still feel close to Logan to be like, well, I'm like him.
Yeah, I think that probably flattered her a little bit and was part of her sort of rise here in the episode was, oh yeah, all right, I'm kind of playing this game in the shadows. And she kind of suggested that if you raise the price to a certain level, they won't be able to say no, which, yeah, I guess duh, but that is what he did in the end.
Shiv definitely liked that, and I think we talked before offline about how Shiv wants to be like Logan in her personal relationships. The one in power who's kind of detached and doesn't actually love the person and could walk away, which is not actually what Logan's relationships were like, as we saw in private, but it is how they appeared. So I think you're definitely right that she enjoyed this, oh, you're like Logan, and the feeling of power here.
And I think it plays into her kind of going back to Tom here, because she's like back on her hot girl shit. So she's like, I can lure Tom back in now that I feel like I have more like power over him. And now that I'm like flirting with this hot, broad Swedish man and everyone knows about it and he's a little jealous. Okay, now I can use that to kind of lure him back in. So yeah, I thought that was definitely part of what was going on with her and Tom in this episode.
Yeah, you're definitely right. I think Tom wants to go back to what they were like at the beginning of their relationship, where Shiv was very dependent on him. Shiv wants to go back just a few months ago to when she was like the cool girl boss, quote unquote, and Tom was, at the foot of her bed, there, doing whatever she wanted.
Shiv's pregnancy plus her potential drinking in this episode. I mean, she didn't do the coke. She just kind of fumbled with it for a bit and put it away, which actually really reminded me of what Roman did in season 2 when like Edward gave him some coke and he just kind of played around with it for a second and kind of pretended to do it and then gave it back to him. So I like that both like Shiv and Kendall are like, I don't tangle with that stuff because my older brother is an addict and I got the same genes.
A relief to see, since it doesn't always go that way and, other siblings can get addicted.
She didn't do the coke, but she was sipping. I think she was definitely sipping.
We didn't see her. I didn't see any alcohol actually make its way to her mouth. Like she kind of.
The champagne at the end seemed a little more conclusive to me than the whiskey here.
Okay.
I think it was a little sip, which like it's not gonna do anything, but it's like something to just put a flag in that.
Yeah, I thought they did some really great subtle storytelling in this scene because the camera was very unfocused on her when she would like play around with the coke or reach for her drink. It was kind of from Matsson's perspective, and he was very focused on himself. You couldn't entirely see what Shiv was doing.
The ambiguity is probably on purpose. The fact that at this point we know that she's pregnant, so obviously we're going to be paying a lot closer attention to all those things. So the fact that it's like you can't quite tell. I mean, they could have made it really obvious one way or another. They could have shown the level in her drink, going down quite a bit, or they could have shown her like snorting coke. Or they could have shown her just like not accepting drinks at all.
Which would have been a huge red flag.
I understand why she was pretending. It's just interesting the way they're playing that a little ambiguous on purpose, I think. The scene between Shiv and Tom where they're just acting like middle schoolers with a crush, bullying each other in the playground. Interesting.
He actually like sort of hit her, like not really. Like you said, it was very middle school, just to kind of
a flick on her ear.
Yeah, a flick.
It's weird.
Your ears are chewy.
Your earlobes are thick and chewy like barnacle meat, is what he said to her.
I wasn't expecting this behavior from them. But it's nice to have some, tonal lightness.
Yeah, it's like kind of cute.
I want them to go back to their weird shit where they're weird, but they're a couple and they're finding some comfort in each other, And it was just interesting how Tom obviously overheard when Roman and Kendall were offering to fire him on the plane in the beginning,
So then at the end, she kind of toys with him and goes, oh, I want to talk about ATN. And he's like, oh, you're really going to do this? And she swerves and says, I want you to fire Sid. You little minx, Siobhan.
That was very hot of her.
She used to be a little hot this episode.
I loved the move of Kendall and Roman offering to fire Tom for her. It felt like such a big brother thing to be like, we can do this for you as a little favor. And
Yeah.
she, of course, hated it. She wants to be one with power, not, oh, well, we cut you out, but we can, fire your for you.
Ex-husband, yeah. They're like, we will kill for you. Please ask us to kill for you.
I mean, that's me as an older sibling.
A couple other just little things that came up. The way that the old guard interacted with their like hot Winter Olympian Swedish doppelgangers was so funny. Carolina and Eva look so similar.
It was scary. I'm a little worried for Carolina being put in this role now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved the contrast between them. New versus old and European versus American. They're always got their finger on the pulse, the writers, with those sort of things.
And the kill list at the end of the episode, Hugo out, Frank and Carl out. Oh, also Frank and Carl were serving this old married couple this entire episode on the back of the golf cart together, sitting outside the sauna together, putting on their compression socks on the airplane. I want what they have.
I'm gonna miss them.
But yeah, Jerry and Carolina are in if the sale goes through.
Do you think the sale is gonna go through?
I don't know. I don't know anything. I kind of want to say yes. I have no idea.
I want it to go through at this point. We've just been through so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth. I feel like at some point we do have to get just a decisive something happened.
In real life, these things can be drawn out for a very long time, but I think as a TV show, they need to make some decisions at some point.
Oh, and during his rant, Roman said something about how you've been dragging this out for the past 6 months. So do we now have an official timeline of that? That was a 6-month gap?
I give up on the show timeline.
Show timeline's confusing. But that does mean that Shiv's baby is not from Italy.
Oh, good point.
Because she's less than 5 months along.
I still think there's a good chance it could be Tom's.
I think 100% it's Tom's because it's a TV show. They're not going to be like, ooh, random baby daddy arc. Are you joking? It's Tom's
a lot
baby.
of shows would, but I don't think Succession would.
Succession would not do a Shiv's baby daddy arc. God, kill myself.
And there isn't time.
Right. Who would it be at this point? Doesn't make sense. One other little thread in here, Connor was calling them from preparing Dad's funeral. He asks for a blanket sign-off to do whatever he wants with Logan's body. So, cryogenics truthers, this is how we win. He's gonna freeze that old man.
The kids clearly forgot about this long-held desire of Connor's, and so did I until you brought it up just now.
He was literally like, can I do anything I want with Dad's body and you can't get mad at me? And they were like, of course, Connor. That's not a weird thing to ask at all.
This made me so sad that this was like the B plot of the episode was, what do we do with Dad's body for the funeral? Because they had to do the fucking retreat.
Oh, I know, yeah. Rough one. What the fuck's going on with Greg at this point?
He's chilling.
Does he have a character arc at all? They let Nick Braun speak for a really long time in that after show, considering Greg did nothing in this episode. I was like, why are we listening to this man?
Yeah, he mentioned Kendall is taking Greg under his wing, and I would have loved to have seen the show that Greg or Nick
see that happen.
Apparently filmed.
Right, yeah, I don't think that is what happened here. He asked Greg to do something for him, and then was like talking to him later in one scene and kind of like chuckling, but there were other people around, so...
I don't think Kendall really trusts Greg anymore with anything more than something like that.
They had their chance for the Kendall and Greg team up sort of at the beginning of season 3, and it fell apart pretty quickly, so I wouldn't hold out for it, but oh, Greg, what are we going to do with you?
I'd be okay doing nothing with Greg if they just kind of phase him out a little.
It would be so funny if they did nothing with Greg. I would sort of want them to do something just so it doesn't feel like a waste of a character who's not getting very much screen time, but he's around.
Yeah.
They flew him out to Norway, come on. But I also think it would be kind of funny if they just did nothing with him. Like, well, anyway. The last thing that seems like it's gonna pop up in the future is that ATN apparently has a direct line with the Mencken campaign, and Roman seemed to know about it.
Yeah, I liked the surprise that just as Kendall made a move without telling the others, Roman is also making moves without telling the others.
It's interesting, though, because he was only asked back into ATN like 2 days ago. Was this in motion before? Did it only just start happening in the past couple days?
It's very hard to tell with Succession whether something has been going on for longer or they just have a tight timeline to work with and need us to not think about it too hard.
Yeah, but either way, interesting to see where this goes. I'm so excited for the election stuff. Woo, let's get into it.
Election stuff / our excuse to talk about Angels in America on our podcast.
Everyone watch Angels in America before. It's very relevant, I promise. You'll see.
I watched it last week and then immediately started a rewatch a couple days later.
You got super angel pilled.
I really did. I'm hunting down a copy of the play to watch as well.
The Andrew Garfield one?
Yeah.
Yes, I have to watch that one.
We have to watch that one.
We have to watch that one.
Further studying for Megan's 2 scenes.
Watch him not even be gay anymore.
We saw the trailers, he's gonna be gay.
He looked really gay in the trailer. I will repeat this joke when he actually gets introduced in the show, but the fact that when they were casting their new fascist character, they were like, hey, can we get the Jewish guy from Angels in America?
Yeah, the gay Jewish guy from Angels in America.
Casting decision of all time.
It's incredible. I don't think we're talking about it enough.
I didn't really know who he was in season 3, but now, yeah.
I had to tell you he's Jewish.
And he plays a lot of gay characters too, so I'm just like, well, I think this is all on purpose.
It was definitely on purpose. Casting decisions can be kind of a clue to the audience of what to look for in the character.
Yeah, I think they're pretty purposeful with their casting a lot of the time too.
I did like how the ATN having a direct line came back at the end with Shiv telling Tom to fire Sid. As Rowan mentioned, Sid was also involved in the old direct line thing, so I think Shiv is definitely trying to set up a position for herself where she can kind of use Tom to pull some strings over ATN.
Good point. Yeah, I can't wait for Roman and Shiv to just really fight each other over the politics.
It's the one thing that, they're very close out of the siblings that we talked about, but that is something they have not touched.
Yeah. And things got very, very tense between them in season 3 in that episode. Yeah, I'm excited. Although it looks like next week we're going to be in LA doing Waystar Studios, which is interesting because we haven't really seen a lot about the movie studio, and I did not expect to this season, so I have no idea what they're going to do with it, but let's go, I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious.
And Kendall's like off the shits again, doing something crazy. He's got that glint in his eyes.
I'm so worried.
He's going to sing again, I think.
What do you think he's going to sing?
I don't know. A show tune.
He would sing music from Hamilton. Kendall would do that.
Oh my god, yes. I'm not throwing away my shot.
Yes. There's a Kendall Roy fan cam out there to that song.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that, but there is. Well, let's do our little segments to wrap up. Let's do Burn of the Week.
That's not a good retort. Don't fucking laugh at that.
My Burn of the Week was when Kendall said we're death wrestling with ogres, and then Shiv said, you're reading documents is what you're doing, Ken. This was something that someone needed to say eventually, because the way people talk about their little business stuff in the show is so dramatic. Like when Logan is like, it's a fight for a knife in the mud. Girl, you're sending emails.
I love that. This exchange was so siblings.
What was your Burn of the Week?
Mine was Norway, Sweden, what's the difference? It's all descended from the same rapists.
Slay.
It felt like they were talking directly to us in the scene with the confusion over Norway and Sweden, and then this, okay, I'm from the East Coast. I don't have particularly strong feelings about Scandinavians. You, Jenny, are from Minnesota, and have talked extensively about how much you hate Scandinavians. So I love Tom getting this line and having this burning hatred of Scandinavians.
Okay, yes, because Tom knows some Scandinavian people.
He does.
Look, God, Tom's been through it. Everyone, I swear, I know so many blonde people. It's terrifying.
Yeah, I know one blonde person.
Wow, you're so lucky. There's a lot of blonde people out here, man. It's rough. I also wanted to shout out one of the burns in Swedish, so these were kind of translated by various people, but one of the things that they said about Greg was, he's 2 meters of nepotism, a Habsburg giant.
This is Greg's greatest contribution to the show at this point, is we get to have tall Greg jokes.
Right. That's his main role, is that people just dunk on him for being like 6'7" or whatever, which is excessive.
It's excessive. Why did you keep going?
Let's do Candy Baby.
Ugh. Hot. Ugh.
So, my candy baby for this week was Shiv. I've been trying to save Shiv, and I'm very glad I did because she was amazing in this episode. I think everyone was really looking great. I love winter clothing. Everyone looks great in it. But Shiv, in particular, was serving. I loved her takedown of Matsson. From the moment she got there, he was sexually harassing her, but she took total control of the situation, and without him realizing, played him like a fiddle. It was really great, and she did all while wearing a very hot leather jacket. I specifically want to highlight the leather jacket she was wearing in that late night scene with Matsson. She looked great. She had her hand in her pocket. It was just a fantastic look.
I agree so much that I also picked Shiv as my candy baby this week. She just had the best looks, all right?
She did.
Yeah, I would wear all those outfits. I would love to. I loved the puffy jacket. I like her hair this season in general. I think it's really cute. And she was definitely vibing with Matsson. All right, back on our hot girl shit. And when Tom like flicked at her ear, she did something with her voice that Shiv has never made a sound like that before. And I'm sorry, but awakened something in me a bit. We don't have to talk about it too much, but yeah, that was...
You brought it up. This is
I brought it
what
up,
you do
but...
always. You're like, you bring something up and you're like, well, I don't want to talk about it though.
I don't want to talk about it, but just like, yeah, you guys saw it and heard it. You know what I'm saying. All right, let's do location.
Venice, St. Bart's, the Maldives. Has she heard of these locations? She must be aware of them.
So this was filmed at the Juva Landscape Hotel in Norway. Which you can look it up online. It's kind of cool to see just where it is, sort of, nestled into the forest. And it's spelled Juvet, but pronounced Juva, apparently, which is Norwegian for gorge. So there you go. A fun fact about this location is the 2014 movie Ex Machina was also filmed here, which is a movie about a horrible tech guy billionaire played by Oscar Isaac who creates these like AI robot lady servants for him to sexually abuse and whatnot. So not totally off theme.
Not at all. I'm sure the production team was fully aware of that. That's a fantastic reference.
Right. I'm not sure if that's why they chose it, but it definitely works.
It definitely works. And I think regardless, this works really well as the kind of lodgings that a tech bro would choose for his little retreat. I also loved how this was clearly a European's idea of a fun getaway. When Kendall and Roman got there, they were shocked by how small it was, and I think that is a very American thing. Like, what a European's idea of a nice hotel is different from an American idea of a nice hotel. Okay, their hotels are small.
They were being so bratty. I got mud on my sneaks. This was probably the closest that we will ever get to my dream of a Succession ski trip episode, which I am heartbroken over. But we did have the gondola, the sauna, pronounced the proper way, and après-ski vibes in general. So this is basically our ski trip episode.
The gondola made me think of you. I was like, oh, just like when people go skiing, like how Jenny goes skiing.
I've actually never... Oh, wait, I was going to say that I've never been on a gondola for skiing, but I have at Lutsen in Minnesota. They have a gondola, so I have. But I went out west this winter, and we went to Powder Mountain, and they only had chairlifts there, and we were just getting like buffeted by wind nonstop, and it was really
only
fucking
chairlifts.
Only chairlifts. It wasn't we didn't have those fancy like standing.
This is your let them eat cake moment.
Cable cars. I know. I have very strong opinions about my skiing, like headcanons for all the Roy children. All of them ski. Yes, even Roman. He does not snowboard. I am a snowboarder, so I know that Roman skis. Roman has intense, like, skier vibes. They all do, actually. They all ski. None of them snowboard. Let's just get that straight.
I mean, do rich people snowboard? Skiing seems way more like a rich person hobby.
Skiing is bougier, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, skiing's a little bit bougier. And, like, snowboarding's just hard on the knees. You know, you're not going to do that to yourself.
You're just going to have to write the ski episode yourself.
I know, I'm going to. Like, Tom can go with them and be like, I'm from Minnesota, Siobhan. Of course I know how to ski. I went to Buck Hill as a kid.
I'm just, like, smiling like I get all these references.
Okay, anyway, let's do best line.
Words are just, nothing. Complicated airflow.
My best line, I struggled a bit, but the one I ultimately really wanted to talk about was They're just Europeans, hammocked in their social security safety nets, sick on vacation mania, and free healthcare from Jerry.
I picked the exact same line.
You gotta be kidding me.
I picked the same line, but you go first.
Okay, so this is kind of a failed burn, which is why I'm glad we agreed. It belongs in best line, not burn of the week. It's such an American thing to say that, like, oh, we're overworked, we get almost no benefits, and that makes us stronger, okay? We're stronger than everyone else in the world. It doesn't. It just makes us more tired than them. But this is the kind of thing you have to say when you're exhausted and everyone else in the world hates you.
Yeah, and it didn't, like, work out that well for them in the end, too, considering so many of them got fired. Or, like, pre-fired. Nope. So, like, there you go. I think Americans have a lot of, like, envy-fueled resentment towards other countries that we think have their shit together, and they very well may have their shit together, but, you know, like, the Scandinavian countries are definitely at the top of that list. Like, Denmark is always being proclaimed the happiest country on earth or whatever, or maybe it was Finland, but, you know, like, fuck Denmark, fuck Finland. We Americans have to cling to this view of ourselves as rugged individualists. Our suffering has to have meaning. And I think it's really just, like, thematically apt that we are ending the show with the decline of this great American company, in scare quotes, and the decline of the American empire. And I think the upcoming election stuff and our turn towards, like, fascism is really going to underscore this point. Matsson is definitely not some kind of socialist icon, but he sometimes uses that language, like he's a little bit Swedish, he's into equality, right? That was something he said in the last season. So it just feels right that we have this tension between like a brand of kind of imported European socialism and then our like homegrown fascism, which, you know, Europe's doing that too. Let's give them credit for inventing that.
I would not say homegrown.
We're putting our own spin on it.
We're putting our own spin. We got some seeds from Europe.
They invented that, but yeah, it was just a perfect like encapsulation of modern American insecurities and anxieties. We are snakes on a plane, indeed.
That's great. I'm glad we picked the same best line. I feel like we really complement each other.
We're on that same wavelength. We're cooking.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do number one boy.
You're my boy. You're my number one boy.
My number one boy was Roman. I'm not really trying to spread my choices around this season. I'm just going with my heart. So I'm always kind of picking whoever flopped the hardest in this category. And this was just a disaster of an episode for Roman, but I've also never loved him more. He was either literally wearing one of Logan's sweaters, or it at least was a sweater that like heavily evoked a Logan style. So either way, rough one for him. And he was very preoccupied with honoring his father's legacy. At long last, he emotionally snapped and said what he was actually feeling and thinking. No ulterior motive. For maybe the first time ever, I can't really think of another scene where Roman has been this emotionally honest. Maybe the voicemail that he left for Logan only a few episodes ago, but he's always hiding things behind like irony and jokes. And like Roman can be honest without being vulnerable, but this was a moment of real honest vulnerability for him, which of course Matsson saw and sprang on and just took full advantage of that, which sounds a little hot when I phrase it that way. But
it sounds much hotter than it was in the episode.
Yeah, it wasn't that hot in the episode, but you can spin it in a certain way. Like, yeah. Okay. Anyway, I just cannot get enough of emotionally unhinged Roman. I still would love to see him sobbing on the floor before the season is over for my own sick gratification, but this was a delicious appetizer. If they try to get him for an SEC violation, I will just say, Your Honor, my client is baby girl. Drop the charges. Who hasn't done an SEC violation on top of a mountain in Norway? We've all been there.
It's what you do after your dad dies. You know how there's certain things when different people in your life die?
Yeah, it's a process of grief.
Yeah.
Who is your number one boy?
So my number one boy was also Roman.
Nice.
I'm also not trying to spread things out too much because I think you gotta go with your heart and have an actual reason for them to be your number one boy. Roman was the number one boy for this episode. It's definitely Roman's episode. He's just an empty shell right now, kind of being shepherded around. He hasn't slept. He may or may not be wearing his dad's sweater. He's not being funny. I hate seeing him like this, and kind of the opposite of Jenny. I hope we get to see him be a little happier. But it's what I want to say. But at the end of the season, I want to see him be a little more present than he has been. Hopefully one of our wishes will come true. I'm sure one will.
Both could come true. He could sob on the floor and still, it would be cathartic. Okay.
Yeah, we could have
And
both.
hot.
I think it wouldn't be Roman if he sobbed on the floor with an appropriate person. Like, it's got to be with someone he should not be this vulnerable with.
Absolutely. He definitely can't show this in front of like his siblings, for instance. Although, yeah, I mean, Kendall was there, but he really needed like a third party to sort of unleash on.
Yeah, I think especially in the context of them trying to do these negotiations together, there was a level where neither of them could get that vulnerable with each other.
Great Roman episode. They really are just piling on his pathos episode after episode. Everyone's like, wow, Roman is so sympathetic. And then they're going to slap us in the face with fascism arc. I can't wait. I'm so excited, honestly.
I'm excited. I like when TV makes characters hard to root for. Like, bring it on.
I know. Bring it on. I'm excited. I can't wait. I am just running like head first into this wall. And I'm happy about it.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you. Ooh, all right. Thanks for joining us this week. If you enjoyed the episode, you can hit like. You can subscribe. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers, so that's cool. And you can give us money on Ko-fi. Is that where you were gesturing me on? I was getting there. You were like, and I know. I'm working my way up to it. I'm working my way up to it. Yeah, give us some money on Ko-fi. I'm going to say it both ways. The link is in the description. Savannah's shaking her head at me. They shouldn't spell it that way if it's supposed to be pronounced coffee.
You can't copyright the word coffee.
You need to give your company a name that's not the name of an incredibly common drink that people drink every day of their lives. Like, oh, my new company called milk. My new company called water. Are you fucking kidding me?
That's the point. It's like, buy me a coffee on Ko-fi.
Buy me a coffee on Ko-fi.
That just sounds stupid.
No, it doesn't.
Yes.
Buy me a coffee on coffee sounds stupid.
Can
like you
set
said
up a
the
poll?
same
Can
thing.
you ask our listeners?
I don't know if I can do a poll, but
We can ask them right now, which sounds better.
when you donate, you can say in your message. So yeah, big thanks to people that donated last week. Let's keep the pledge drive going. Woohoo!
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, like even Alexander Skarsgård is only like 6'4", which is like that's the cap. That's like all right.
I'm like, these are all insane heights to be. No one should be this tall.
My dad is 6'4", so 6'4" to me is like, yeah, that's a guy. That's just like a guy.
Below that, you're like, eh.
Below that, you're not a guy, but you get a little gender fluid under 6'4". No, it's cool to be short. Up to a point.
What are you trying to say, Jenny?
That you're under 5 foot?
Just barely.
Okay, 4'11".
Closer to 5 feet than 4'11", but...
Okay, all right.
But